Sure, there's still people waiting to be admitted, but we will just slowly start this exciting meeting. For those of you already online, a very warm welcome. It is truly a privilege for me to address you at the start of this very interesting and what I think will be an intense period for SIANI. For those of you who I haven't met, my name is Cecilia Nording van Gansberg, and I have the honor of being the chairperson for the SIANI Steering Committee. And it's wonderful. Oh, great, you have a really nice photo here. It's great that such a bad thing as COVID has meant that we learned fast to use technique to stay in touch, even though the distances are great. And looking at today's agenda, you can get a really good sense of where we're going in the next couple of years. And I'm sure we will spend a very interesting, useful, and also fun 2 hours together. The future looks set to further encourage cooperation between and within groups, which before looked entrenched. I don't know if you remember, but there was a time where people didn't talk to each other, even though it would be to their mutual benefit to do so. But so much has happened in the world. I think we have all realized that we now have to look at things in a new and fresh world. We're becoming bolder as we want to find new solutions. And while recognizing that we cannot do it on our own, SIANI has now, through its and your hard work, found an important place in this work. And as the evaluation of the last period stated, I don't know if you read it, but it was very interesting read. SIANI is highly relevant to its members, as has remained so over a long period of time. And also, SIANI has a professional way fulfilled its mission as it has been defined, and selected activities are in general appropriate and effective. So we can only go up from here. SIANI 4 is said to be even more useful, and I look forward to be able, in my capacity as steering group chair, contribute to SIANI moving forward. However, the most important thing are all the people who take an interest and work for SIANI, it to be a true platform where we can meet and discuss and find solution. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Cecilia, for those welcoming and encouraging words. We are so happy to have you with all your rich experience with us to guide our work in this new phase of SIANI. So good morning and good afternoon to all of you joining us from all corners of the world. My name is Madeleine Fogde, and I am the director for the SIANI network platform. And it is my pleasure today to guide you through our annual meeting. But first, we need to go through some quick housekeeping rules. Make sure that you are muted during the presentations and when you're not speaking. The session is recorded and will be shared on our website after the event. So if you don't want to figure with your face, please turn off the camera. If you want, it is great if you can rename your Zoom name to your name and add your organization which you are representing or working for. Our group discussions will not be recorded, and everyone will be anonymous when we report back. So it's supposedly a quite safe space. If it can be safe space online, we hope it can. So you should feel safe and express what you think is important. And so the first part of the meeting is really to get a grip of who we have with us in this meeting. And to do so, we will use a Menti, and it will be introduced by our intern, Charlie. So Charlie, please, can you take the seat?
Yes. Hello, everybody. Hope you're hearing me well. As Madeleine said, I'm the intern for this semester, but Unfortunately, it's coming to an end soon, but I'm happy to end it on a positive note with such an important meeting. So just grab your phones or your computer and use the code 1557897 and answer the question what your expectations are of this meeting, to see what we're expecting and what we hope to gain today of these 2 hours we have in front of us. So gaining new knowledge seems to be a big one. Yeah, networking is not as possible this time around as the physical meetings, but perhaps you can speak a bit in your breakout rooms later. Yeah, and also it would be interesting to hear where everybody is currently located. So Sweden, of course, Uganda, we have people joining from Uganda, that's nice. Iceland, Sri Lanka even. We have someone writing in the chat, they're from Malawi. That's super cool. All around the world, it seems. Perhaps we'll have a chance to talk briefly in the breakout rooms or in the future. Germany, Sri Lanka, Italy, Philippines. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Now we've introduced ourselves, and I think the next step is to move on to some interesting presentations. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Charlie. So it's really nice to see. I think they're still entering answers to the Menti, but it's nice to see this widespread, and it's also motivate us really to have these online meetings as well as physical meetings. In the past, it was only physical meetings, but as Cecilia mentioned, the COVID helped us to also get online, and with that we can reach out in such a much better way and get people from almost many regions to join us. So we have had one in real life meeting, and we have this online meeting, and we will have an in real life meeting on the 15th of November in Kenya, where our African members and followers are most welcome. We are happy now, and this meeting is for part of a kickoff of our new phase, where our focus is the transition towards more equal and sustainable food system, and how to make them work for smallholder farmers, SMEs, and vulnerable groups, indigenous groups, and young people. We want young people for our future food systems. So we have invited to invite a number of presentations from different sectors. But first out, we have a great honor and pleasure to welcome Lorenzo Giovanni Bellu, Senior Economist Lead at the Policy Intelligence Branch and Global Perspective at UN FIO in Rome. And you will present for us a very new report, which will tell us about the future of our food system. So Lorenzo, please, welcome. Take the seat.
So, hello, Madeleine. Hello, everybody. Thanks a lot for inviting me, and thanks for the interest in the work of FAO. In fact, this report comes at the end of a process which was a corporate foresight exercise aimed at, it's a twofold exercise, I would say, on one side to feed into the programming efforts of the organization of the FAO to shape up the strategic framework until 2031. And with the second goal is to share with the global development community the findings and the thoughts and the vision of FAO regarding the future of agri-food systems. With these two goals in mind, I will briefly explain, first of all, the steps that we went through to get to carry out this corporate foresight exercise, and the basic findings of this exercise that have been condensed in the report that you see, The Future of Food and Agriculture, Drivers and Triggers for Transformation. So let me say that in the next slide, you see the steps that we went through. First of all, defining agri-food systems, because you always need to define things before starting working on them. Identifying driving forces of agri-food systems to understand what pushes them and how these forces could push in different directions. And why did we do that? Because we wanted to detect what in future science is called weak signals. Weak signals of which signals, what are they? They are just things that happen in the reality that may magnify or may shrink, but whatever, they may reveal some parts of possible futures. And once we detected all these weak signals, we tried to condense all the signals that we got in 4 alternative narratives of possible futures. Why? Because we wanted to communicate to decision makers what are the plausible futures, with no pretension to be exhaustive, because we created 4 narrative scenarios, 4 narratives for 4 alternative scenarios. And why 4? Because this is a manageable number. In principle, you can see that you can create as many narratives of the future as much as you want, but we wanted to communicate with decision makers because we would like them to share with the organization common values and a common vision about desirable futures. And for us, a desirable future for agri-food systems is a future of sustainability and resilience. And in order to facilitate this work, we identified triggers of transformation, which are domains within which decision makers can play by shaping up strategies and policies that may have a transformative impact on agri-food systems. And just to give you an immediate example, if you go to the next slide, you see what I mean when I say agri-food systems. You see that at the core of agri-food systems, we have basic activities like producing agricultural commodities, processing food, distributing, and consuming. And some of the driving forces of agri-food systems are generated within this subset of activities. But in actual fact, agri-food systems don't work in a vacuum. They work in the context of broader socioeconomic systems that provide additional driving forces, population dynamics, income generation activities, and the institutional setup, geopolitical instability or stability, and so on and so forth. These are all driving forces of agri-food systems that are not generated within agri-food systems, but are generated in broader socioeconomic systems. And even socioeconomic systems happen or interplay with environmental systems at large, that on one side provide inputs into or factors or natural resources for agri-food systems, land, water, biodiversity, climate, and on the other side they are affected by agri-food systems in terms of pollution or overuse of resources, greenhouse gas emissions, and so on. So now this is just to say that when you look into the future of agri-food systems, you cannot be confined to specific agri-food systems activities, but you have to have a much broader view of things, societies and economies, particularly if you look into the long run. Now, just to give you an immediate example of what I mean when I say weak signal of possible future, you see in the next graph, you see that there is this is just, for instance, one of the variables that we consider. This is the income per capita in the last 30 years, from 1990 to 2020. So what you observe immediately, that there is the gray line on the top. This is high-income countries. They went from almost more than $30,000 in 1990 up to 50,000 in 2020. Okay, all the other lines, the colored lines, they are regions, of low and middle income countries. So first of all, you see that some of them are growing, some others are completely flat. And I want to draw your attention on Sub-Saharan Africa, which is the light blue line. And you see that the dynamics of Sub-Saharan Africa, they are non-existent. They started with 3,000 in 1990, and they are at 3,000 at the end of the period in 2020. So this is the historical trend, but what is the weak signal that we can get out of that? So the weak signal is that convergence between high-income countries and low-income countries, at least in terms of per capita income, is not something that occurred in the past and may not occur in the future. So we cannot rule out a future of non-convergence because this is something that we have already observed. And what are the implications? You know that you use income for consuming on one side, but you also use income for savings. So a future where capital ownership, asset ownership, land ownership, water ownership, and even knowledge in terms of human capital and even more immaterial type of assets like information handling, artificial intelligence, and so on. All these things may be skewed in terms of ownership and control. So a future where land, for instance, artificial intelligence, and so on, is going to be concentrated in the hands of few countries is something that we have to consider. The next slide, you see an additional example of an important driver from which we get an important signal. This is agri-food prices. This is the index of prices to producers. The black line is the historical pattern from 1993 to 2018, while the colored lines, they are scenarios that we simulated. These are FAO scenarios that we simulated in 2018. They reflect alternative futures, but whatever the future you choose, our simulations tend towards increasing food prices. And the blue line, straight line, this is a trend line on historical patterns. So the big signal that we get is that we cannot rule out, and we have to consider a future of increasing food prices. Also because we know that if we want prices to reflect the true cost of food, which is not the case today, prices are probably going to be higher in the future. FAO is very much engaged in an exercise on detecting the true cost of price, and a couple of next reports of FAO will be very much focusing on that. Now, let me look at another example from the output side, and the next example is an example where we dig into the outcomes of agri-food systems. This is the prevalence of undernourishment, percentage of people suffering from hunger. Again, the black line is historical trends. You see that food hunger is not going down, quite the opposite, is growing around 10% in the last for the last data that we have. And the three scenarios, again, they are three scenarios that we simulated in 2018. The green line is a scenario of sustainability and convergence, which could bring us close to Agenda 2030 objectives. The yellow one is business as usual, and the red one is a scenario of exacerbated inequalities and increased climate change impacts. You see that historical patterns are following what we considered in the past the worst case scenario. Again, the weak signal that we get when we look into the past is that it is not possible to rule out a future of hunger coming back in a quite solid way. So when we condense all the weak signals, we analyze more than 200 variables. We condense this in four alternative narratives. The first, and in the next slide, you have a snapshot of these narratives. If you go to the next slide, you see that we have a scenario which is more of the same, which means this is a sort of adjusted business as usual, that you do more of the same, but you don't change the development paradigm. And then you have a scenario which is adjusted future, where you focus on the short run and you try to get results in terms of the well-being of people, but you don't change the fundamentals of the socioeconomic systems, and you pay the price in the future of the price of unsustainable development. The race to the bottom is a scenario where you keep going and you exacerbate inequalities, you exacerbate climate change, and you may experience a substantive collapse of parts of agri-food systems. The scenario where we transform more, which is trading off for sustainability, is a scenario where you transform, but you pay again a price. This is a scenario of sustainability, but this scenario doesn't come for free. You have to give up immediate consumption, particularly in high-income countries, to invest more in research and development, to overhaul all the capital that uses fossil fuel, and you have to invest in research and development to find new solutions, new nature-based solutions. Let me conclude with the next slide, where you see that we identified 4 triggers, governance, consumer awareness, income and wealth distribution, and innovative technologies. The way you invest in activating these triggers through policies and strategies, so if you want, the way you trigger these triggers, if you allow me to say, may shift our future from one scenario to another. Just for instance, we know that governance, we don't have governing mechanisms for global phenomena. Just conflicts is just an example, killer example. We don't have governing mechanisms for climate change, despite all the COPs and so on. So we see that greenhouse gas emissions keep increasing, and we don't have a mechanism for equitable climate future, because we know that we have countries in sub-Saharan Africa emitting 0.2 tons per capita per year, while other countries, high-income countries, emit up to 15 tons per capita. So this is the reality, and depending on the way we are able to handle these things, we may shape up a desirable future or a much less desirable future. So with the next slide, I leave you with the key message that we get out of our report about the future of food and agriculture. We believe that it is still possible to change and to transform agri-food systems, but as I said, this will not come for free, and we have to be ready. Either we change our metrics, the way we look into the future, and we demystify a lot of narratives about development, or we are not going to shape a future of sustainability and resilience. There is little to be optimistic when we look at the different drivers and so on, but at the same time, I may say that pessimism is a luxury that we cannot afford. And there is a call to transform agri-food systems using all our knowledge and all our means. Otherwise, the future is not going to be rosy. Over.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lorenzo. I'm sure that many of the participants have some reflections and maybe even questions. And if you have so, please put them in the chat. So in the meantime, I think it's a challenge to read these kind of scenarios, and you get a little bit, you understand how important collaboration and work across sectors and countries are if we are going to stay in the green. And but when you look at then the drivers in the green areas, which one would you assume is the most complicated, or where we have to work hardest do you have any ideas, or how do you see this? Because we need to work here all together.
Yeah, if you allow me to say, there are 2 items which are fundamental, not because I'm saying that, because I would say the UN is very much involved in trying to master, on one side, biodiversity, on the other side, climate change. And these are fundamental things that we cannot neglect anymore. So what we call now developed countries, unfortunately, we have used a model of development which is not sustainable at all. We have depleted biodiversity, and we have stored a lot of CO2 and the equivalent gases in the atmosphere. And we cannot call ourselves developed, because there is nothing developed in something which is not sustainable. In actual fact, we have to demystify a lot of the narratives about the development that take into consideration this dichotomy. Developing countries are developing pretty much like developed countries, and developed countries don't exist anymore. If you look at them through the lens of sustainability, it is very much important that so-called developing countries don't follow the same pattern that we followed, and high-income countries follow a completely different pattern from the one that they have followed until now. Otherwise it's going to be a disaster. There is no room to keep going like that. And this is challenging, and I mean, the future is in our hands, all in all, But climate change is pretty much tough to deal with.
Yeah. So thank you, Lorenzo. We have short of time, but I would encourage everyone to continue to put questions in the chat, because Lorenzo and his team will probably be happy to answer them as they come on. If there come on questions in the meeting now. And with this, I would like now to go down to reality, and for us also to get a view of how farmers vision this transition and for a more equal and sustainable food system. And we have a pleasure to have with us Irish Bagilat, who is the coordinator for the Asian Farm Associations for Sustainable Rural Development. Irish, please take the seat after this report. We need to hear what's going on the ground. Did she disappear? Irish? Coming back.
Hello, Madeline. Sorry, my internet. Yeah, sorry, my internet connection is unstable at the moment. So I hope in the next 10 minutes, I know I can go through what I wanted to say. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting the Asian Farmers Association for Sustainable Rural Development, or AFA. We are currently based in the Philippines. We are a regional network of 16 national or federation of small-scale women, men, and young farmers engaged in crops, livestock, fisheries, herding, and pastoralism. So yeah, it's really a pleasure to get to know the SIANI network, and also thank you to Lorenzo, the previous speaker. It's a very interesting information to hear what you have presented. So. Yeah, the AFA. I just want to mention how
let's see what's happening. She's coming back. Okay.
Maybe without video if she comes back.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe you should turn off the video, Irish, and it could be more stable. Yes, please.
Okay, sorry. How about now?
Yes, it's good,
Okay.
but we keep our fingers crossed.
Okay, yes, sorry. So yeah, AFA was formed through an exchange of farmer leaders from 5 countries, and prior to forming the organization, after they have seen the realities of other farmers in other countries, after they have seen the similarities of the issues, they came together and said that there are so many similarities of challenges, and there are so many solutions that we can share together. And so they decided to form this regional network of farmers organizations so that they can engage at the regional and also at the global level, and continue the exchange of knowledge among small-scale farmers. So please let me know if my audio is not
It's okay.
Okay, so yes, maybe the next slide. So can we move back? Sorry, just to, yes. So as a regional organization, next please. As a regional organization, we have these this agenda. So our farmer leaders are committed to pushing this agenda among our constituencies. So at the moment, the total membership of AFA is 11 million small-scale farmers in 16 countries. So the first agenda you can show is the rights to land rights or rights to natural resources. So we continue to push for the rights to land, seeds, waters of small-scale women and young farmers in various countries. Of course, the situation is different from country to country. And the second agenda is on sustainable, resilient agriculture. So we unite in pushing agroecology among our membership. And third is on cooperative development and strengthening. And then fourth on the empowerment of women farmers. And then the fifth is the empowerment of young farmers. And then lastly, the strengthening of farmers' organization, in particular their governance. So before I show you what we have formulated last year, we were active in in the Food System Summit. We did about 20 independent dialogues starting from national mobilization. So we did 11 national independent dialogues to really consolidate the voices of small-scale women and young farmers. We did 7 regional dialogues, and we participated into global dialogue. So we really were able to consolidate so many messages that we would like to bring into the different platforms that we are invited to. So yeah, on the next slide, I just want to start with these, that in the dialogues that we have had, one of the things that we have been pushing even during the preliminary processes of the UN food systems, and even after that, we're saying that it's important first for all actors to recognize the capacity, the innovation capacity of farmers, smallholder farmers. Even before we talk about forming solutions, we talk about the future. It's important for the stakeholders to recognize that farmers are solution providers to transforming the food system. And of course, we have highlighted so many indigenous traditional knowledge of how the natural resources was conserved by indigenous farmers, and also the innovations that farmers has been doing for in the past to maintain agrobiodiversity, and also to continue sustaining the health of the soil. So I want to start by highlighting that message. And on the next slide, you will see here how we have how we see the transformation, what smallholder farmers and fishers can contribute in the transformation of food systems. So there are many solutions that we have discussed in the past months. So one is agroecology and organic production systems. We thought that we will continue as farmers organization, we will continue to push for this solution. Sustainable fishing initiatives, for example, there are already so many innovation on these. And then climate change adaptation strategy, and also strengthening of farmers and fishers organizations and cooperatives, and also platforms, and empowerment of women and young farmers, and so on. So these are the things that we will continue. We will contribute towards the shift that we would want. And we hope that with all these, like contributing to the food systems outcomes, like food security, nutrition, and healthy diets, we also want to see outcomes that directly, impact smallholder farmers that we don't see much yet in the past. For example, the improvement of really the well-being of farmers and fishers, and of course the increase in the economic empowerment of farmers, and also the improvement of the resources that the farmers hold, like water and soil, and also the conservation of agrobiodiversity. So on the next slides, I have listed some of the obstacles that we are currently facing while although the presentation earlier have shown that the situation is worsening, and some are saying that there is progress. So while we can say that there is progress, still we face a lot of obstacles in the work of transforming our food system to make it inclusive, healthy, sustainable. At both national and global levels, many actors have inadequate coordination design, as we have observed, and I think that is also one of the key message of the earlier presentation. So lack of coordination, inadequate coordination in implementing effective programs for smallholder farmers. And also we have seen, where our members are, there is lack of policy coherence between agriculture, fishery, forestry, health, nutrition, environment, and also indigenous peoples and local communities, as well as family farming organization, bewail inadequate representation in consultation and policy making bodies. Therefore, feeling that policies and programs do not work for us, the smallholder farmers, and it's not within our reach. So yeah, and so forth. Up until now, the financing sector has not designed their services and programs to be responsive to the situation and capacities, especially of the women and young farmers. For example, it's a very, very minute example, but in other countries, some of the financial institution uses, a land title to offer loan, for example, but we know that women and young farmers don't have that, as collateral. Women in other countries do not get a land title, and also the young farmers. So those things, there are examples, of course, to show the specific challenges faced by smallholder women and young farmers. On the next slide, while we have these obstacles, of course, these are the things that we hope that we can do as farmers organization, a big network at the regional and global, and with the support of course, development actors, and all of us that are here. So and our government. So we hope that there will be investment in an appreciation of the contribution of family farmers, not just in producing food, but also in taking care of the environment, in storing, carbon in the soil, for example, and in conserving agrobiodiversity and the knowledges associated with agrobiodiversity. And also, we really call for investment towards empowering organizations of family farmers at all levels. I'm sure that some of you know that there are already evidence on how cooperatives, are helping smallholder farmers increase their income and their market power. Next, you can proceed. And I think I have emphasized that we are hoping for recognition of farmers as actors, as effective agents of social, political, cultural, and economic change. We are consolidators of wealth, as I have mentioned. The indigenous knowledge we have, we share them, and that was the underpinning of why the AFA was formed, to share the knowledge. And we are also extensionists. And we also, as an organization, we raise the voice of smallholder farmers. So it is our advocacy that partners will continue to support strengthening of farmers' organization. So there on the next slide, I will not go through that, but this is what we want, the partners and the world to know, that we are also providers of solutions to the problem that we have. And our solutions are, we have millions of smallholder farmers. We believe that our solutions are accelerators to us achieving our global agenda. And more importantly, we are also we can support climate actions because of the things that we do, especially the agroecological practices. So lastly, I think I want to yeah, I will not go on to the case that I would want to share, but yeah, we have, I mean, you can visit our website. We have cases of how family farmer organizations and cooperatives are enabling the empowerment of small scale farmers and fishers. In some of our membership, they were able to tap government services. They were able to engage in policy and decision making because they have consolidated their voice. And yeah, I think I want to end with this.
Yeah.
We
We
are
are
not
coming
just
to an end.
food. Yeah, so we produce knowledge and solutions that will contribute to the transformation we need. Thank you. Sorry if I spent so much time.
No, but it's fine, Iris. You were also, we had some technical mishaps. Thank you so much for this very powerful presentation of all the capacity and resources that you and your organization of smallholder farmers represent. So we had a question which is not so much related maybe to it's related to the well-being, and it's a question of increased prices, which Lorenzo also referred to, and we see that it will continue to increase. So the increased prices of food, is that also benefiting smallholder farmers, or are you outside that? Can you enjoy some increase of the prices? Because of course we need to pay the right price for the food.
Yeah, thank you, Madeline. I think I want to respond by saying, like, in one you know, in a very practical manner. So at the individual farmer, you know, the increase in price is not felt by individual farmers, but as cooperatives, you know, that on the retail end, if cooperatives, you know, does that retail part, no, of the value chain, then that's when the farmers can actually feel the impact of increased price. But as individual farmers, if they are just merely, you know, price takers of traders, then they will not be able to benefit from increased price. But as a collective, as a cooperative, you know, them reaching directly to the consumers, then that's when they can feel the outcome of price increase.
Thank you. Very good for us to know also, and how important the cooperatives are for the transition also in the future, and should be acknowledged. We will continue our presentation. We have still some very interesting presentation to come. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Ivar Vergin, who is representing the researchers' perspective on what has been said in this, and how the researchers, how we would like to see maybe researchers to work to also accelerate transition in the positive manner. The knowledge we need it out. And how can we do that, Ivar, please?
Thanks, Madeleine. So I'm just representing them, sort of a broad collective of research and academians, being, you know, a very wide congregation of people. But I'll give a view and a perspective from one of the programs I'm being engaged with. So next slide, please. So just following what I think Lorenzo and Iris gave you a very good background on some of the issues and the farmer perspective here. So I'm not going to go through this in detail, but it's very crucial that we act now in order to sort of reach SDG 2. And farmers in the global south, particularly those in Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Asia, Southeast Asia, are producing much of the food, as you know, for in those regions. And for them to become more productive, profitable, socially and environmentally sustainable, they need this transformation agenda, and it needs to be supporting them and tailored to them. But you also know that this transformation is very complex, and to be fully effective, and from a scientist point of view, I think we need to have this transformation rooted in science and best available knowledge. Next slide, please. And to tailor to specific to the local conditions. The good news in a sense is that okay, we have going to continue about all these challenges, but we have also a number of new opportunities for smallholders. We have a range of technologies, being precision farming, soil nutrient optimization, improved seeds, cultivars, agrobiologicals, digital extension. And the thing is that all of these technologies are increasingly being accessible to smallholders. Of course, there are all these obstacles, but I would say in general, increasingly they are being much more they're much more available today than it was just 10 years ago for smallholders. So, and also we have emergence of new, more effective governance and land use systems inside. And we just heard from Irish about the power of cooperatives, and we also have farmers organize themselves in companies, and we have new land use sharing systems, which also are very promises in order to increase productivity and sustainability. But scientists with an ability to synthesize and analyze and communicate their research finding and collaboratively work with the local stakeholders is extremely important, we think. And I will share with you, next slide, please. The obstacles here is, of course, that as scientists, you sometimes only see part of the problem, or you're mostly interested in your specific niche of science. So it's difficult to get a holistic view, and it's sometimes also difficult for scientists to really feel that they understand the process of their research leading to a change. Next slide, please. So the key here is the engagement with that stakeholder community out there, outside the academia, which is of course a wide range of actors. And this is just a slide showing that stakeholders is a diverse group. But next slide, please. The idea here that I will share with you is that what we have done in something called the agrifood 2030 program that we run from Sweden together with a number of universities and together with a number of partner universities in Southeast Asia and Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, where we focus on smallholder farming in these regions. And the idea is to synthesize and translate existing science and knowledge into policy and practice, and develop capacity of researchers to do this. Researchers in those local areas, at those local institutions, to be able to communicate, to contribute to social, economic, and environmental sustainability of smallholder farming. Next slide, please. So the way we do that is that we have science, and we have the researchers, and we have this communication engagement activity and sort of that base for us to reach the stakeholder. And what we do is to train scientists to communicate and engage with that stakeholder community, whatever that stakeholder community is in their particular situation. So we have a large number of projects where we have scientists engaging with be it local farmers, extensionists, local governing institutions like local boards, agriculture boards, or community country communities, or small in Nakuru, for example, in Kenya. It's very much the local policymakers and their engagement there is just in focus to reach the SDG2 targets there. Next slide, please. So what we do here is to train the researchers and to communicate with stakeholders and shape the type of knowledge that is needed to improve practices and policies. So this involves a lot of networking, and here you see typical agrifood activities where researchers are engaging with stakeholders and trying to identify what type of change do we want to see, what type of science do we need, what type of knowledge do we need in order to reach our goals. Next slide, please. So the key here is how to create a change contributing to those SDG targets, and in those groups where we have scientists meeting these local stakeholders, and identifying what change is needed, what change is realistic to happen, how and why will it happen, how will change happen, and what are the obstacles for it to happen, and also what changes will we see, and what are the process for these changes. It's really to focus. It's not so much on what we do. It's not so much about, we had this workshop, we had this report coming out, we had this research article being published, but these are pillars and linchpins of the actually change that is to happen, and focusing on that change. How are these activities and outputs going to achieve that change that we all are wanting to achieve? Next slide, please. So what we try to do is we design for each of these projects, we design an impact pathway where projects have their sphere of control, where they control all activities, or what they're doing, the outputs and so on. And then we have outcomes, which is the change process. What do we want to see as change coming out from these projects? And this is a program wide impact pathway. So we want to see increased capacity of scientists to be those actors, synthesizing analysis and communicating, engaging stakeholders with their science and knowledge. And we want to see increased use of science-based knowledge in policies and practices. And that connection between scientists and policymakers and practitioners and farmers are extremely important, and we're trying to encourage and catalyze those type of interactions. And next slide, please. So what you will see, and I'm ending up here, is very detailed. I'm not going to read it up, and it's too detailed for you to see, but this is the type of impact pathway for a specific project that we are developing. And what you see is that the projects are doing things here in this area, in their sphere of control, leading to large of specific changes as a result of their activities. And then they are leading to activities, they're leading to changes further down after the project as well, hopefully, and if well managed, will contribute to SDG 2 targets and for contribute to increased food security and nutrition security for those communities where the project is engaged in. So it's the beauty with these type of impact pathways, and this is a map of engagement, in a sense, how to engage and what do we want to achieve from this engagement, is that also that all stakeholders can come together and share these maps and see, hey, this change is important to us, but how do we reach that? And maybe we can fine tune the activities along the way so that we are actually achieving this change. So it's a great way of communicating and engaging stakeholders using these type of frameworks, engagement frameworks. So with this, I'm ending. I'm just saying that ending with I think in general, this as scientists, we are often focused with we focus on our research and our outcomes, but I think if it's increasingly important also for us to actually do that engagement and try to see what is the best effect of our knowledge and how can we communicate and try to realize real change that has an impact in reality. So with this, I stop.
So Ivar, we have a nice question here in the chat from Mesha Kip-Moy about
Yes.
the methods you use to engage stakeholders in these processes, and how do you identify the stakeholders? It's a good question.
Yeah, that very good question. Thanks. That's a key, of course, to the process. Identifying the stakeholders relevant for this change that the project are setting out for is one of the key activities, and that involves a lot of work. And with engaging stakeholders, it's also a process. So the more solid you are in your engagement process, the more solid you are in your change pathway. So and there I think a lot of scientists, they do have a lot of academics, they do have contact, but I think sometimes that it's sometimes difficult to reach out and cumbersome to reach out, and then but it's well worth doing it. And while you're doing it, some of these engagement and network activities are actually like rings in the water. I mean, they create more actors involved, and then suddenly you are there with a fairly really rich actor network that you can engage with. So, and the methodology is if I can mail him the frameworks that we're using. It's called the theory of change approach. It's one of the approaches in a sense. It's an engagement method, but it's really I think the key here is identifying your stakeholders and identifying what is important for them and what can you contribute with as scientists in that change process. But I can mail him a bit more information if he wants.
Yes, I think to all these questions, I see that the chat is now becoming more and more vibrant, and there are questions coming up. So please, speakers, have a look at the chat. I see, and some of the questions you can write and also send. So we will take care of these questions, even though we can't maybe manage them in this meeting, but all the questions will be answered to you, and we will send them and make sure you get answer to your questions. Now we are going to another continent, and it's my sincere pleasure to introduce to you John Mugonya, Program Manager for the Agripreneurship Alliance in Uganda. It's really a pleasure to see that the Agripreneurship Alliance is now with a base in Uganda, and you are also playing a very important role in the food system and also linking academia to the food system. John, please take your seat, and we'll hear from you from the private sector's perspective. That's what we have asked you to present.
Thank you, Madeline, for the kind introduction, and also for inviting Agripreneurship Alliance to be part of this annual meeting. The Alliance is a Swiss-Uganda organization that is non-profit, and it works to spur agribusiness on the African continent through tailored training programs for university students, for the farming community, but also through research. So I am delighted today to present to you the role of private sector in food system transformation. Next slide, please. Yeah, so back, the first slide. Yeah, so to give my presentation today a bit of ground setting, I'll define what agribusiness private sector is all about. It's that part of the economy that is run by individuals and companies rather than government, and their work is often for profit. So the agribusiness private sector then includes farmers, startups, SMEs, national corporations, and multinational corporations. Next slide. So these actors have very big role to play in the food system transformation. And these are just 4 ways that they can help food system transformation. There are so many ways, I just picked 4. One of them is innovation and technology. So big corporations can use research and development and technology transfer to help to make agricultural chains optimized. For the farmers and small startups, they can then adopt these technologies to reduce the carbon footprint in their production or processing chains. Then I think that there is a point that we have to make for the informal private sector. And these are the people that ensure that the big corporations, the national corporations are up and running. The smallholder farmers, the street vendors. So in countries in the global south, these people face challenges due to climate change, drought, floods, and the safety nets are either non-existent or they are very weak. So this is a call to the big corporations to use their platforms to engage for policy, for social protection systems, to support these informal private sector, but also they can use money, a bit of their profit, to invest in the systems, the safety net systems. However, another point that is related to this, there's a feeling that we need to formalize everyone in business, which I think could be problematic because many programs have worked on this and the results are out there for everyone to see. So I think it is important for the food system to reach the people where they are. The other is financing and investment. Again, the big corporations have money that they can invest in the small businesses, the startups, to ensure that they can adopt the climate-friendly, environment-friendly technology. Collaboration, policy, and advocacy is another one. That private sector collaborates with other stakeholders in the food system, say government and government organizations, to leverage knowledge, expertise, but also advocate for policies that would make the food system sustainable and resilient. Next slide, please. So another way that the private sector can contribute is by participating in the carbon market. The carbon market is a specialty market that farmers, smallholder farmers cannot participate on their own. So the small players need support from the big players. So here to mention but a few, if the big private sector can act as a chain between the smallholders, the small players, with the offsetters of carbon, then we would have benefits of increased income for farmers, enriched biodiversity, and also higher productivity. So here, I also want to make mention that many countries have come up with national determined contributions, and they're looking at private sector to lead the charge. But private sector up to now in the global south, in Uganda, for instance, is largely non-committal. So there's need for private sector to commit to the national determined contributions and help to reduce the carbon footprint. I now would like to share with you a case from West Africa, from Cote d'Ivoire, that Farmstrong and Rabobank, next slide please. Farmstrong and Rabobank are utilizing to ensure that they support smallholder farmers to access the carbon market. So they have a project called agroforestry carbon reduction for organic restoration, for the organic restoration of nature. And this project is about cocoa farmers utilizing the opportunity of agroforestry. So you have the farmers, you have a partner here, the partner is Farmstrong, who links to Rabobank. Rabobank platform measures the carbon credits and then is able to sell this to the buyers. The farmers will get 80% of the income that comes from the carbon credits, and there's a win-win for the planet, but also the people. Next slide, please. So, because we work with young people in Africa, I thought it was important that we include opportunities that emerging entrepreneurs can utilize to also contribute to the food system transformation. And one of them is alternative protein sources. There's a realization that our favorite foods, such as beef, are contributing immensely to the greenhouse emission. So alternative protein sources, say from crop-based protein, from insects, is an area that emerging entrepreneurs can utilize. The other is climate resilient crops like sorghum, millet. The COVID-19 pandemic showed us that the global food system, where major calories are coming from millet, are coming from wheat, maize, and rice, is really non-sustainable. So we need to find ways of localizing and diversifying the food system. And one way is to look around for crops that are resilient, but are within farming communities. The third that emerging entrepreneurs can look at is food loss and waste reduction. Young entrepreneurs can innovate ways of reducing food loss, post-harvest losses, but also how to make waste something that is valuable. Maybe making fertilizers out of waste, making feed for animals could be ways that emerging entrepreneurs can contribute. So on the last slide, there are pitfalls that big corporations need to avoid so that they don't disrupt the food system in a negative way. And one of them, corporations need to avoid taking over public governance systems that regulate the market and fight inequality. We need to be honest here that corporations have a strong motivation to make profit. But however, if that motivation drives them to dictate policies, it might disrupt prices, for example, to levels that would make the food system not inclusive. The other thing to avoid is engaging in competitive, non-competitive practices, say monopoly. This would also lead to price distortions. The corporations need to avoid disregard for social and cultural factors that influence preferences in food production, consumption, and nutrition. The presentation from AFA by Irish has demonstrated that farmers have the knowledge, they can contribute to solutions. So as the corporations are supporting these farmers, it shouldn't be throwing what the farmers have in the basket and introducing something new. And then the last point here is that the corporation need to be transparent in accountability. They need to be responsible and really share with stakeholders what they are doing. So I want to end here, and I thank you for this opportunity to present here, and I would welcome questions at this moment in time. Thank you so much. Back to you, Madam.
John, thank you very much for these very interesting and important reflections from you as one of the actors in a very, very diverse private sector, and very important for the transformation. And I think it's so interesting also that you highlight eventual pitfalls and what we have to work with, and pathways towards a more green and sustainable systems that also brings productivity to the smallholder farmers. There are numbers of crises affecting us all. They look very different in different way of the world, but as agripreneur, you are also vulnerable. But the last crisis that we see here, also with increased prices on food, for example. So how does that affect the agripreneurs in your areas and associated to the Alliance?
Yeah, of course, there has been increase in fuel, for instance. The effect that we see for agripreneurs that we work with is not so much to do with them not being able to continue doing what they're doing, but their costs, of course, go up, and they have to push this to the consumers, who are also squeezed, and some of them are not able to continue paying for the products. So a few entrepreneurs were not able to emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic and also the war in Russia, in Ukraine. So the effect is there. However, There are other factors that we think that the young entrepreneurs can take them as opportunities. So if prices of, say, fuel have gone up, can you innovate alternative energy, which is sustainable, which is clean, that you can then use and make money and contribute to livelihoods of people? So there are problems, but also silver linings that come along.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And as you can see, it's so important that we get all these different levels. We have collected voices from different regions. And now also another important actor for the transformation and smoothing things towards a green and more sustainable transition is, of course, also donors. They play an important role. And we have a pleasure to have with us today Elizabeth Simmelton, Senior Policy Specialist in Agriculture at the Swedish International Development Agency. Elizabeth, please, after all these presentations, what is the role of the donors now in this transition? So we are very eager to hear what you can bring to this meeting now.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you also to the presenters before me who have shown so many good examples already on what is needed and ways to move forward. I think really, really interesting presentations. I look forward to the conversations afterwards as well. I just came from a training course that we are taking on systems transformation. And so my head is almost exploding with ideas about how to move this concept forward, because it's a lot to take in and to sort of see where we want to go. Lorenzo has shown scenarios as a way to move forward, but how do we know which scenario would be the one that we could agree on and move forward to? And one of my take-home messages actually from this training is also that the need for visions that we want to be heading towards and the needs for participatory engagement from the bottom up in order to move forward. So I think all the voices we've heard already are really good examples of that. We also see signs that the pathway we're on with agri-food systems globally need to change. We've had a doubling of people in food insecurity over the last 2-3 years. And these are people who cannot afford food, as John was mentioning, who cannot grow their own food because of conflicts or because natural disasters have destroyed their crops. And so these are factors, the 3 most common mentioned factors, but of course there are other underlying issues, as Lorenzo was showing in his graph, and that we have been also discussing in the chat on the side. So we've also seen good examples, and thanks to SIANI, of when fertilizers and these inputs were no longer available in Ethiopia, there were resource persons who quickly could transform and change and use their own available resources to start growing vermiculture and create their own composting instead when the fertilizers no longer came, and use their own local seeds to feed themselves and the communities. And the role of these farmers will continue to be important in the future. And I think this is important also for us at SIDA to support and see how we can move towards more diversified systems. So I just wanted to actually bring up one of the things that we are doing at SIDA at the moment is a committee on sustainable food systems that we've just started, and it will continue until December next year. And we've only had 2 months really to work on it, but the main sort of objectives here is to organize our thinking about what we mean with food systems. And this involves getting to grips with terminology that we often use a bit without thinking too much of what we mean, or that different thematics use in different ways. And so this is a cross-thematic group with members from humanitarian side and also from development and operations and research. And we specialize in different thematics So, for example, environment and trade and nutrition and the HDP nexus. So this means we use the words in some words in different ways, and we want to try and understand how we can get closer and talk to each other. Also, the words transformation and systems are also, of course, these kind of words that we are using without thinking always on what they mean exactly. The second objective is also to support our colleagues who are working in the operations and their partners. And we're having still discussing here what the concrete contribution might be to see in the fields. We also want to support the internal learning at SIDA, and this could be done through seminars or exchanges with and interactions with other thematic networks internally at SIDA, but also with other donors, for example. And of course, we organize sometimes seminars with SIANI. We also, thanks to SIANI, have very concrete questions to work forward on here. One of them is the new European deforestation regulations that will affect many of our actors in our partner countries, and just to try and understand what that would mean for them, and also in the future, if they can sort of continue to export to Europe and not being stuck in their own systems. So I think on moving forward, and some of the things that we will work on here is also to try and understand food security and the role of agriculture in the context of conflict and humanitarian development nexus, peace nexus. One of the aspects is, of course, is how we avoid that our contributions don't cause conflicts, agrarian conflicts, or resource conflict over resources. As well as environmental degradation, and such as the overuse of groundwater extraction. And we could also be, causing unwanted competition on the ground when we go in with support. That could be, for example, we are discussing now what kind of support we want to contribute in terms of or not support in, for example, interventions that are monoculture. Should we support them? Monoculture maize could outcompete small-scale farmers who have more diversified systems already and function quite well. But if we go in and want to support the monoculture maize farmers, they might actually be in competition with good operating functional systems. So how do we intervene without to sort of transform bad practices without affecting those who are really good? How do we produce cheap and sustainable, safe and nutritious food, such as also contributing to school meals? And I think John was touching on this, how the private sector could evolve and contribute to this. We also have interesting examples here of collaboration between FAO and the World Food Programme in the Sahel, where there are more examples of working in the peace, for peace, supporting peace. Sorry about my wording here. Another thing that we wanted to do here is also to map our contributions across the agriculture value chain, just to illustrate that we are already doing a lot of activities at SIDA that contribute across the agri-food systems. But when we map them and tag them, we may not always be showing that these are actually contributions to agriculture. Rather, they are tagged as environmental or market development practices. And I think it's important here to understand where agriculture is part of the solution and not the entire solution. Also learning a lot from good contributions that we already have and partners who are already doing lots of good stuff. We have, for example, contributed to ICIPE, to FAO's seed programs, the same as SIANI on working on sorry, not SIANI, Oxfam, on how to work with orphan crops and underutilized crops and how they can be part of the solution in the future. How can we just bring in those examples to the next contributions and spread those practices. And we also talk about working with like-minded donors, but we've also seen here the really good examples of creating networks of our partner organizations that are the organizations that work with these like-minded donors. I think just listening here to the farmers associations in Asia, across Asia, what a strong voice they are when they come together and could be doing advocacy in new ways. And we have a lot to learn from them, actually. We also saw some good examples here on circular systems that John from Uganda was sharing. I think really, really interesting to bring these up more on the table. And I did mention a little bit already about this exclusion list, but this is something we also have to think about when we work more with guarantee instruments. And we are trying now to talk about internally how we can go about this moving forward. So it's extremely difficult to say what we support or don't support. Should we be funding fertilizers, pesticides, monocultures? I just said that already before. Yeah, maybe sometimes, maybe not, maybe not. And it's really difficult to say when, in what cases those should be supported or not. Sometimes a small addition of fertilizers is okay, as long as we're not moving into some kind of dead end where we create new systems and new dependencies. I think what we've seen from these farmers I was talking about in Ethiopia at the beginning were that when you are flexible and independent, you're actually also better at responding to this kind of crisis. But how do we formulate sort of rules for the support that we give? And on the similar alley also, as well as we're talking about scaling out projects, how do we detect when there are green and blue and social washes involved in this? We don't want to be supporting that, of course, but it's sometimes not until afterwards that you're able to discover that. So detecting these signals and deciding how to stop when there are tendencies that these large contributions are going in the wrong direction. I thought, and I looked at this, the slide that's like the stepwise moving forward of the workflow and going backwards again that Lorenzo was sharing. I think it's a nice idea to think of it that when do we say stop and when do we continue? Really, really important, and how to identify what those indicators or signals might be. So this is some of the work that is at the table of a senior policy specialist at SIDA at the moment. I'm happy to take questions, and if you have. That's all for me for now. Thank you, Madeleine.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth. Right on time, or so we are keeping up with time, and we have some questions in the chat. There are some questions for you, Elizabeth, and there's a big question to say, when are we going to put some timeline for smallholder farming in Africa? It would be interesting to should we always continue? It's interesting to reflect on that. Do you have any reflections on that? You come from Asia, you have worked a long time in Asia and coming into Africa, and we see these millions of smallholder Asian farmers as well. So any reflections on that, Elizabeth?
Thanks. It's a really good question. And of course, I don't have an answer. I have my thinking on that. I've always been asking myself, how many farmers do we need on this planet? And I still that question, still I think it's legible. But then on the other hand, what would be the alternative for these farmers? Farming is not only a way to make a living, it's also a way to survive for some people. In the case where you have big families and some of them have moved away and they can always come back to the farm as the last resort. This we have seen in Vietnam, where I was working previously for a long time, as well as in countries in Africa, where there is temporary migration or some part of migration, longer migration periods. And I don't have an answer to the question, but I think we have to keep in mind also that there are what would be the option for those people who are small scale farmers at the moment.
Yeah, so I think we have had very nice presentations and good questions, and and the room with that we had for collecting questions, it's not really there because we had some we were a little bit over time. But I think we will do like this, that we have all the questions in the chat, and then we will make sure that they are answered to. But now we will go into the group discussions while we are still in a very engaged and excited mood, and we share and have a conversation in the groups and come back again and report. And the speakers, please look at the chat and respond to them. And yeah, so let's go into the group discussion. Continue questions. If you see your speaker there, speak to them in the room as well. Okay, let's go. Yes, so welcome back to the big room again. I hope that you all have enjoyed your group discussions and feel free to contribute. Very important issues has been brought up in the different groups, and I would like to hand over the screen and to my colleague Lauren to kind of who is visiting all the groups and will kind of summarize some ideas coming out from the group discussion. I must say this was not an easy task, but let's see what you have captured, Lauren.
Yes. Thank you so much, Madeline. Indeed, very interesting ideas came up on the mirror board, and I hope that you all had very interesting discussions and that you were inspired by the presentations from our speakers, ranging from the FAO to the farmers, researchers, agribusiness, and donors. And I see that also really represented in the ideas that you came up with. So I tried to summarize some of the key ideas that you came up with, but I would also perhaps ask for some clarifications as well. One of the key things that came up as a trigger was climate change being a significant trigger that we need to recognize in order to change our food system. But we also recognize that farmers lack the resources and knowledge for adapting to the climate. So that's one key thing that came up. But also another thing that came up was the consumption patterns in high income countries. And an example was given of red meat consumption in high income countries being too high. And that also contributes a lot to the climate change situation. And generally consumption patterns being high in high income countries, including food waste. And there's a need for us to drastically reduce this in creating a more resilient food system. There's also a discussion on too much focus on attaining the highest possible yield and not giving adequate consideration to the balance between promoting biodiversity and reducing climate risk hand in hand with yield improvement. And that was also very interesting to see. I wonder if the group that came up with that would like to make a comment about how they see this sort of balance happening in terms of the balance between yield improvement and biodiversity protection.
Which group was it?
Perhaps group 5? No.
Okay, good. So maybe it's easy to locate.
Let's see.
Yes, we have a moderator for group 5.
Or was it?
Yes, I was moderator for that group. What point was needed clarification?
Okay, I'll check again, but it's more in line with the sort of managing yield with biodiversity protection So don't focus so much on yield attainment, but also just look at how you can protect the biodiversity or protect the climate in the process of increasing yield as well. Perhaps I missed the group.
No problem. Let's go on. And
Yes.
the group that has this discussion, please come forward and Sloan, you can continue a bit and then we can come back to you.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I don't know if it's, I don't remember the name. The first presenter mentioned where that we need to focus on also in the Western world, we should only focus in Africa or in the small older developing countries. Also, there's a lot of production in the West that we need to sensitize about good production systems. I don't know if it's in line with that. Somebody else could help out.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the Sustainable Development Goals makes it clear that this is a joint effort between high-income countries and the so-called low-income countries as well. So it's a joint effort between all countries in this case. I move on to another group talking about the profit motives of large corporate actors being a major trigger in transforming the food system, and that large corporate organizations are interested in profit-seeking, and this profit-seeking behavior needs to be balanced with also a more altruistic view of the world and altruistic view of their contribution to the food system. So they don't have to be entirely profit-driven. They should also have a sense of sustainability and care for humankind in their minds. There's also another contribution relating to weak technological innovation and adaptation being a major trigger of change in the food systems, and that we need to make technology more accessible for all, including smallholder farmers across the world. There was a major contribution about many countries being off track in attaining the Sustainable Development Goals. We are only a few years away from that, and we need to have detailed discussion and bringing countries back to the drawing board and keeping them on track towards attaining the Sustainable Development Goals. Would Group 2, would you like to elaborate a little bit on this countries going off track and how that influences or is a major trigger of the food system?
Yeah, this was a contribution from Nigeria, it was also, Carolina, you want to say something? So evidently there are many farmers, they are on the track, they are on the progress, but still they need more support, and that's and find that the ways of support. But otherwise they are working hard towards what has been presented as solutions, but still difficult to be on track. I think something like that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. One of the final things that was mentioned in relation to the triggers for change is that we're currently working a lot in silos rather than working with a more system-minded perspective. So we need to move a little bit away from this silo way of working to incorporating a system-based thinking and perspective into our way of thinking, so that we can sort of achieve the aims of a sustainable food system collectively, rather than in silos where we just keep repeating what perhaps other people have already done and not getting the benefit of the nexus between the different actors within the food system. Now, the other contribution related to how organizations can be drivers of change in transforming food system. And the major contributions there were that we need to keep encouraging continuous collaborations and networking between stakeholders in the food system. We need to encourage good linkages between governments, between researchers, private sectors, donors, civil society, and all the major actors within the food system. So again, this system-based thinking comes back in, and we need to have these partnerships and collaborations as a major way of reaching a more sustainable food system. We also need to encourage research and sharing knowledge among each other in order to attain a more transformative food system. And some organizations are emphasizing on research and knowledge sharing as a key to reaching this. But also we need to provide space, such as several networks for sharing ideas about how food systems can be transformed. We all have several different ideas, but we need to create a space and platform for sharing these ideas, but also a platform where the contributions of traditional knowledge or indigenous knowledge can actually play a frontal role in how we sort of move forward with the transformation of the food system. And I think that Irish mentioned in the presentation that that's one of the key things that the Asian Farmers Association does. But that knowledge also needs to transcend the Asian Farmers Association to other organizations that are working within the food systems as well. But another thing which is final with this that I was able to come up with from your mirror board is that organizations can influence policy and can build increased partnership and can encourage community-led development. So organizations should be able to work more with policymakers and with a bottom-up approach, which is community-led, but also fund some research that is useful for transforming the food system. Thank you, and I give it back to Madeleine.
Oh, thank you so much, Salorm. I'm so impressed that you managed to go through the Meyer board and get this summary. It was really impressive, and it's so nice to hear all of the contributions. We will now collect this carefully and bring it into our planning and what we can do. And it has come through that knowledge and knowledge sharing is important, reaching out, sharing in networks, working between sectors. And this is something that SIANI will continue to do. We will also focus on the people and the producers that are actually sustaining our food system with food and how they can be helped in their tasks through our networks, through our collaborations. And it has been so exciting to touch base with you all today. And we will continue, as I said, with a number of meetings. And before closing off this meeting, I would like you to also know that we are right now having 2 calls. One is for expert groups, where you can, together with partners, address an issue which is would like to see changed in your food system, and together with people from different sectors, create an expert group and make an application to SIANI. We have that call open 1 more week. In addition, we have also a call open for an online conference. I know that there are many researchers now attending this meeting, so I encourage you all to submit the proposals abstract for our agrifood conference that will take place on the 26th to 28th of September. And so with all this, I really would like to address a very warm thank you to our excellent speakers who has provided us knowledge, also engaged us and got us on the track that understood that how important it is that we all work very hard now and work together to address these challenges we have ahead. I also would like to thank you all who attended the meeting and stayed to the end, and also to the wonderful team working behind the scene of this meeting. We are quite a few, and thank you all. It has been an exciting 2 hours, and I'm now looking forward to a continued conversation with you online via our social media and our website, and you are welcome to write to us and contribute. And we are also planning some physical meetings in the regions with time. So thank you all, and we are looking forward to continue the dialogue with you for future transformation. Thank you.